Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Last week's episode, we assembled and installed the engine on this monstrous tank, and this week we're going to finish installing the interior, the ordnance, and after all of that hard work we did on the interior, we're going to hide it by encasing it in the upper hull.
What?
So go ahead, sit on back, grab something to drink, maybe a snack. We're going to go ahead and finish assembling the lower hull, and we're going to go ahead and add a bit of trivia to keep this thing a little bit more lively. Let's go ahead and get into it. To kick things off, we're going to go ahead and start working on this bulkhead that separates the driver and bow gunner's compartment from the turret, as well as some of the floor panels that sit beneath the turret basket. This is going to be done the way I've done the rest of the interior so far, with the Mr. Surfacer Mahogany Brown as a primer, hull red, and then for the bulkhead it'll be two-tone with that hull red on the lower extensions and ivory on the uppermost position of it. Now for these floor panels here, I did notice a bit of fitment issues. It seems they're a little too wide for the width of the interior of the hull. After a little while of finagling with it though, I managed to get it to lay flat. So you guys might have a bit of an issue with this as well during your installation on your kit if you get one. Let me know if it happened to you or if you managed to get it to lay flat. I did also notice that when I first opened the box, the upper hull itself was slightly warped. So that could be a part of it. For this bulkhead, I've already done the base coat all the way up to that oxide primer red that I've been looking for, so now I'm going to mask that off and ensure that I get the ivory up on the upper bow of it, because that's how it's depicted in the instructions, as well as how it seems to appear in most actual Tiger 2s. These canisters here appear to be some sort of ammunition canister that's suspended on the back of the bulkhead facing towards the turret. These, unfortunately, in the instructions give me two different answers. The text answer is it's supposed to be dunkelgelb. However, on the actual imagery in the instructions, it shows it as this light sage green. So I just went with that just to help pick them out from the interior. As you can see in the instructions in the top left corner, these are all nestled really tightly together, and it makes it a little difficult to try and get them to sit right on the first try, so I cut out a good chunk of that just so that then you can see the before and after. Unfortunately, I glued the last canister backwards, so had to go back and touch that up. But now that that's done, I can go ahead and install this bulkhead into the hull, and then worry about adding this final canister that's supposed to hang on the front behind the bow gunner. If you know what that canister is supposed to represent, please leave a comment so that then the rest of us can learn from you as well. Now to loading the magazine. Concerning the ammunition of the Tiger 2, a lot of people accidentally think that it's just the same gun as the Tiger 1. It's not entirely true. The Tiger 2 actually carries the KWK-43, which is a higher velocity gun. It's the full-size 88mm flat gun mounted into the turret. As you can see here, the round on the left is from the Tiger 1, whereas the round on the right is the Tiger 2. Even though they are both 8.8 centimeter in caliber, their overall length is vastly different, allowing for the Tiger 2 to have greater combat effectiveness at longer ranges. For these ammunition racks, there's 6 of them within a lower hull. 4 of them are within immediate reach of the turret crew, and the other 2 are located adjacent to the driver and the bow gunner. I appreciate Takom including some photo-etch for the case heads, so you can see the head stamps on them. However, they are very, very small. I want to try and save some of these for later, as I have a diorama project that I want to do with this tank that I think all of you will enjoy. So please, stick around for the rest of this series and you guys will be able to see it. It's important to remember that photo etch is not plastic, so plastic cement will not work here. I'm using some Starbond black superglue. It's a little bit thicker in consistency, so it's not quite so runny, and it gives you a little bit more working time to be able to adhere everything together. For the ammunition racks, I'm going to prime them in Mr. Surfacer's Mahogany Brown. It's a lacquer primer, so it bites into the plastic better, and after that I will then paint them black, because that's the primary color of the casings. Once the black is dried, I will mask off the casing itself, and then spray hull red onto the frame components, and top that with ivory so that then it closely matches the interior shade of the rest of the hull. Here I'm just going to touch up some of the overspray that occurred from the ivory, and then I can begin to assemble the ammunition racks. This does take quite a bit of time, all things considered, but once it's done, it really does look great.
3,000 years later.
That took far longer than I'm willing to admit, so let's go ahead and move on and get some of these last bits of frame that separate the ammunition racks from each other under the turret. Once those are done, we can go ahead and start loading up the combat load for the hull. After a quick dry fit, I've got a general understanding of how all of this is going to lay out, so I can glue in those bits of frame now, and then start actually installing the ammunition racks. As you can see, it's quite a tight fit. I actually had a bit of flexing in the bulkhead for a while, and one of the frames kept tilting a little bit because I kept bumping it, but after a while I managed to get these all to sit in just right for the moment. Later on I wound up having to go back and pop them off because they didn't line up quite right, and when I tried to install the upper hull, that was a nightmare. Speaking of the upper hull, we gotta remove these supports. Unfortunately, they didn't work all that great because, like I said before, the upper hull had a bit of a warp to it. Fortunately, once I got it all glued down, it sort of straightened itself out. Speaking of those supports, I wouldn't necessarily recommend using the side cutters. I took a bit of a gamble and it paid off, but I would kind of recommend actually using something similar to like a hobby saw, one of those really fine model building saws. That might work better. Here I'm beginning to assemble the framework for the engine deck. As you can see on the instructions, there's quite a bit of detail back here, and I would highly recommend being careful with the little hooks that you'll be installing in steps 42 and 43. I wound up bumping them quite a bit. Fortunately, I didn't lose any of them. Okay, so that wasn't entirely true. I did kind of lose them on the table, but I found them. They're on the model. We're good. Everything's there. We're gonna be okay. I will admit that warp really started to show its problems with the engine deck panels. I had to finagle them a little bit and try and glue them down. It was a lot of hands-on holding. I think I was messing with it for about 12 minutes trying to get the glue to cure hard enough that it would hold it all together. It eventually stabilized the entire platform in the back, but it was quite the headache. For these compartment panels, such as the bow and driver's compartment, as well as the engine compartment, I was halfway tempted to try and use micromagnets to try and make it so that then I could pull them apart and reveal the interior, but in all honesty, I just feel like that would have overcomplicated the model and increases the risk of losing parts in the long term. So here, I'm just going to glue everything down. Maybe if I get another King Tiger model by Takom, I might do that, or I might even consider cutting cutaway holes so you can actually see into it. But this one's going to be a fully enclosed tank.
What? Why? Why?
Now I know some of you will feel like that was a lot of work that was lost and almost pointless, and you have a point. A good chunk of this will be hidden, but when I take the turret off, because I don't intend to glue the turret down, it will allow you to look into it and see the better part of the interior. The engine, yeah, a good chunk of that detail will be lost. You'll be able to see it through some of the engine grating later, but the majority of it is covered. It's really just in there because I felt that I wanted to try and do a full interior, and at the same time I wanted to share my experience with y'all so that then you have an understanding of what you might be getting yourself into if you were to buy this model kit. Also, this door panel here, it's fantastically detailed, however, it fits really, really snug on the engine deck, so keep that in mind when you go about doing this yourself. I had to play around with it a bit and actually had to shave away a bit of it so that then it would sit flush on the engine deck. I appreciate that Takom included these grills made out of photo-etch. A lot of times when I see plastic models try and mold this into the plastic, you lose quite a bit of detail, Or sometimes they don't even include it at all, so you just have the open grill support frame in it. To adhere these to the model, again, I'm going to use Starbond's black super glue, and that little spray bottle you saw me using before is filled with super glue activator, which causes it to dry faster. I'll be using it again further on in the video, but I know a lot of people might be asking questions about that. It's really handy. It gets the glue to dry quickly, so you don't have to sit there and hold it forever. With the super glue cured enough that I can work with it, I'm going to go ahead and start pushing down on these grills, because over the wear and tear of the actual tank, these grills would start to sink into the framework. Now, it's okay if you punch a couple of holes in them. It's totally fine, but you don't want to rip a boatload of holes in all of them. Just try and make it realistic and something that seems plausible or feasible. For the large round grills on the engine deck, there isn't really a specified adhesion point, so I'm going to put some of that Starbond on the center roundel and then drag that out onto the frame to try and hold that down. While that's curing, I can go ahead and start working on this smaller grill that sits in between them. That I'm going to depress with a brush early, try and get that concave effect like it's sunken in. And then I'm going to glue it on, because I don't want to run the risk of damaging it or the model trying to shape it while it's on the model. Now that the large grills have dried and cured, I can go ahead and start shaping the grill with that sagging effect. Now, the tweezers that I used on the straight ones aren't really working so well here, so I'm actually going to go to a round-tipped sculpting device and start dragging that around to get that sag effect. Here I'm installing those little hooks I was talking about earlier in the video. As you can see, they go around the perimeter of the round grills, and they're really, really small, so be gentle with them and be careful. You have one spare on the sprue. Now, you might be asking yourself, why did I put revisit 42 and 43 on a sticky note? This is so that then I know that there's other things in these steps that I need to adhere to the model, but I want to do those after I put the base colors on, because they're accessories to the tank. You'll see me add more and more steps to that, because I want to try and get the base coat of the tank on the tank, and then paint the accessories off the tank, so I don't have to worry about paint bleed coming off of the accessories and onto the model, and then ruining the overall appearance. Here, you've seen that I've applied the interior of the front plate, the Glacis. Once that's set up and cured, I'm going to start working on the bow gunners and the driver's roof accessories, such as their periscopes, the bow gun itself, and some of the small little auxiliary components that hang off of the upper hull. I feel like these side plates aren't necessarily required for this model kit, as they started causing some issues with fitment when I started closing the hull. They started interfering directly with the ammo racks, which were slightly out of place, and the rear fuel tank on the driver's side of the vehicle. That was rubbing as well. I had to move those around, but I feel like you might be able to omit the sidewalls and get away with it, and just be a little bit more careful when you're applying the two halves together. Now I'm attaching the periscope shields for both the driver and the bow gunner. These will come in handy and actually save me a lot of trouble later when it comes to installing the periscopes, because you can actually over-penetrate those periscopes and they'll sit far too high. They help to give you a good reference point as far as height for the periscopes. Now for the side skirts and the mudguards. I know they're a little thick, and I know there's some photo-etch kits out there, but I wanted to try and stick to the model kit as best as I could and only replace components that were not detailed enough or were too finicky. For example, you'll see later on, I don't go with the original track setup, but I go to an aftermarket available kit to make it more realistic. We finally get to put paint on the exterior of this thing. I'm excited. So this is where the lacquer primer really pays off. Using an acrylic primer, you run into the issue where it's water-based and it wants to beat up and it tries to roll off, sort of like rain on a freshly waxed car. It just doesn't bond well, especially with photo etch. So that lacquer gives it a little bit more tooth and more bite to it, so it can actually grab and bond. This will set up a fantastic base coat for us to really put the paint on. I'm going for that oxide red, and then over the top I'm going to be using German Dunkelgelb, because that's going to be one of the base colors in the camo scheme, and then on top of that I'm going to do the Arctic wash over, which would be more accurate in representing how it was done in the field. As you can see with this Dunkelgelb, I'm not going for complete total coverage. I'm letting it be a bit thinner and a bit lighter in some spots instead of others, because that's commonly what was seen on German vehicles at the time. The paint would start to peel away from the oxide primer from wear and tear, and adds to the realism of the model. It really gives it that worn and lived in sort of effect, because tankers were living out of their tanks. It was literally all they had. They occasionally would go back to like a Ford operating base for refueling and rearming, but generally speaking, if they were out on a patrol or they were doing a movement, the tank was home.
It's my home.
Here I'm test fitting the drive wheel covers. I want to try and ensure that they fit right and that I have it all lined up and that I'm not doing anything crooked. Now, I also understand that you guys might be asking, hey, Graypile, how come you didn't paint the bottom of the hull? And trust me, we'll get there. It's all part of the plan.
What matters is our plan.
Before getting too carried away with trying to check all the fitment, I realized that I did miss a few steps on the interior upper hull. Most importantly, the bow gun. Also, this machine gun ammunition hanger assembly that goes along the back of the hull, right behind the turret basket, as well as the periscopes that we were talking about before. So let's go ahead and knock that out real quick before it gets too late. Now for this bow gunner's assembly, it's very, very intricate. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any photos of one in a King Tiger to try and share with y'all, but the assembly has this like dished inverted bowl sort of thing that the gunner is supposed to be able to put the top of his head into, as well as a forehead rest and a coaxial sight. Now that bowl that I was talking about, it's actually used by the gunner to help direct the gun and ensure that he knows where the gun is pointing, rather than just squeezing off a burst and trying to find tracers. All of it is aligned to make it easier for the bow gunner to operate. For these components that I'm painting here, it's the same process as before. Mahogany primer, hull red, and then ivory top coat. Now, for those ammunition canisters, I will go back by hand and brush on the green to give it that uniform color with the rest of the canisters in the vehicle. Here I'm installing the periscope frame for the driver. The bow gunner has a fixed one that's off axis by about 10 degrees, whereas the driver has one that can actually rotate within the hull. Now, the thing is, with the model, they've fixed it to the 12 o'clock position, so it itself does not turn, but you still have to install this little frame component before you put in the actual periscope. I just realized I put these hatch crank handles in upside down. Trust me, I'm a professional.
You fellas have nothing to worry about. I'm a professional.
Here I'm painting the ammo canisters that'll be suspended off of the bow gunner's assembly. Once those are painted up, I'm going to go ahead and paint the actual gun itself. That's going to be in black. Now, this bow gunner's assembly is really, really tight fitting into the ball joint. I would highly recommend that when you go to encase that ball joint, don't glue the ball joint, so that then you have a bit of play in it to make it easier to install the overall assembly. Now is the time we do the initial test fit with everything fitted, and yeah, I'm feeling a lot of scrubbing. I feel some high points. I'm gonna have to take this apart and see what's going on. I realized now that the ammo racks Primarily, the two central racks were pushed too far outward. You can see when they're lined up, they jut further out than the forward and aftmost ammo racks. So I had to fix those a bit. And then there's a little bit of scrubbing in the back by the engine bay. It turns out that one of the fuel tanks was pushed too far outward. It was the driver's side. So I had to cut that free and try and re-adhere that. It was a lot of test fitting and finagling back and forth, but eventually I finally get there. Here you can see I'm having to adjust one of the small hooks on the back that I was talking about, going around the round grates. That came free because I accidentally bumped it, and in all honesty, I bumped a lot of them. I think I had to re-glue them about 3 or 4 times during this process, just because I didn't get the interior fitment just right. So when I was moving around back and forth, my fingers would drag across the hooks and bend them or pop them out of the glue joint. Fortunately, they're all accounted for though. Finally getting to glue this thing together. And yeah, it's still not sitting quite right. We'll see later on there's a small gap, but I'm going to use the back of the hull, that rear plate, to try and help hold everything together. It's a 98% fitment, like it's not egregious, and I really appreciate the fact that this seam line is hidden up under the side skirt. It really is a blessing in disguise because I can kind of hide it. And the fitment gap is so small, it's minute, like you wouldn't really know unless you break out a micrometer and you're actually measuring it to check for scale fitment. And I'll show you later on in the video how I fill some of the small little gaps coming around in the front and on the back that help tie it all together and hide this blunder. For the rear of the hull, I'm applying most of the components. The few things that I'm going to remove, predominantly the exhaust, are for ease of painting. Now, it doesn't make much sense right now why I'm going to be gluing the exhaust shields on, but I'm using a very, very small amount of plastic cement to attach them, just so that then it's easier to paint them and make sure they're uniform in color with the whole panel itself. I want to try and ensure that I'm not having a bright yellow base plate or dark yellow base plate with bright or dark yellow shields being different colors. This is to help tie the entire paint scheme together, and later on I can pop those off when I build up the exhaust, and it will simplify the process immensely because I won't have to try and reach in to paint the exhaust. I can paint the exhaust separately, and I don't have to mask it off, running the risk of covering spots on this panel that I don't want to cover. The bracket for what I assume is the track tensioner for disassembly is really fragile. You saw there I had to actually bend it back into shape because it's so delicate. This is a piece that I have to be really careful with because I'm afraid it's going to break as soon as I look at it funny. The exhaust shields also are quite intricate. They've got these little Frankenstein neck bolt looking things that go in on the sides. Those are really hard to get aligned the first time. Like they've got little reference dots on them. But the first time I did it, the right side looked fine, but the left side looked like one was probably 2 mils too high, and it looked really crooked, so I had to go back and fix that a few times as well. Now for the final step on this rear hull plate. For now, it's going to be the mud guards. Once I get those installed, we can go ahead and start getting ready to paint this thing. Just like before, for this panel, we're going to do the same as we did for the upper hull. We're going to base in Mr. Surfacer's mahogany, that whole red, and then on top of that, we're going to do dunkelgelb. Now, you got to make sure that when you're doing this and you're taking the approach that I'm taking, you have to spray into those exhaust shields, because if you don't, you're going to get a paint shadow where the plastic itself is still exposed, and it's not going to look right. It'll stand out. I promise you, you'll see it and you'll never forget it. It's just going to burn your eyes for the rest of the time you look at that model. With all of that out of the way, now we can finally start assembling this to the model to help tie it all in and lock it all together. You'll see there's a small little gap forming at the very back where that back plate meets the engine deck. I'm going to go ahead and get in there with a little bit of sprue goo. That's when you take Tamiya thin type and you put a little bit of model sprue in there, hence the name sprue goo. You cut those into small little pellets and you mix it into the glue and it creates this putty sort of thing. And it's the easiest way I can describe it. But long story short, it allows you to use it as a filler, and I'm using it on the rear as well as on the leading edge up on the front, just at the Glacis, right between the front plate and the upper Glacis. That'll fill that in and it'll really hide that gap. Finally, we're painting the lower hull. Alright, so same thing as before, primer mahogany brown, and then when I do the whole red, you'll notice that I make it a little bit heavier in some spots and a little bit thinner in others, as well as putting a couple of streaks through it. That's because I want to show the inconsistencies that were commonly found on vehicles that were coming from the German factories so late in the war. They weren't so necessarily worried about the quality of the coverage, it just needed to be covered. So you would find spots where there was more coverage than in others, and you would see some of the paint bleed through, and at the same time, again, it wouldn't have total camouflage coverage, just because it was, hey, we're building this tank, it needs to get out there, it can be polka dot, it needs to blend in, but we just need this thing out there. It's not doing anything sitting on the factory floor. And now I'm doing one last light coating of that Dunkelgelb on the hull, just trying to sprinkle it on just a little bit, touch up some small areas without making it so obvious that it's a touch-up, because if you stay in one spot for too long, you'll build up too much paint. But it's just to try and feather it all out and make it look more natural. And there you have it, everybody. That's the lower hull of a King Tiger 2. I wanted to try and introduce a little bit more history into this, as it's been brought to my attention that some of you guys actually enjoy having some of the history injects on it. If you like what I'm doing, please leave me a comment. Let me know what you like about it. Let me know what you'd like to change on it, if at all possible. And if you haven't already, and you've made it this far in the video, please consider hitting a like and subscribe. It really, really helps me out in the algorithm. This is a small channel, but we're growing fast, and I appreciate every single one of you for all the support you guys give me. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay safe.